Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video is going to bring you a closer look at the Accurate number 9124RL in a 2 3/4 back set, except that this lock is for a 7-inch thick door. So if we take out the 7-inch thick door part and the funny length cylinder that we have, if we, just imagine that the strike plate is a standard size strike plate, you'd have a 9124RL. But of course, being accurate, they are very willing and very able to, this is a left-hand reverse, to accommodate requirements. This client had gone back and forth with a mortise roller latch lock, which is a relatively new, I'm going to say that it's not relatively new. I am all but convinced I have seen roller latch locks installed in, I've seen roller latch mortise locks in very old catalogs, Yale, Corbin, I'm thinking. I'd have to dig that up, and I don't recall exactly. But I don't believe Accurate invented the lock. Maybe they did, and if they did, good for them. That's great. So this is a mortise lock that features a roller latch and a deadbolt for security. So, why would you want a roller latch in a door? Well, what people are doing is, it's kind of a relatively new evolution in, the way that people are equipping their front doors. Beautiful doors, exotic woods, paints, stains, whatever the case is, lights, really, really nice, modern, quite modern looking material. And they want to cap that off with very beautiful door pulls. And they don't want any lever trim. They don't want that at all. Any knobs, any levers, any ornate grip handles. And what they want is a roller latch. And you can put a roller latch or 2 roller latches on a door and then add a deadbolt. Well, this incorporates both functions into a single lock case. So a lot of people like the ability to be able to just push the door shut and it stays latched, a la the spring-loaded roller latch that's here. And I don't believe there's any way to adjust the spring tension, but we'll look into that. But also give you the ability to have that security with that bolt. Okay. I have sold these before. Why not? Why not use one of these? I would personally have no problem using them. I mean, there's more than one way to secure your door. This is one way to secure your door, there's no doubt. Now, after well, you know what? Let's talk about the 9124RL, and then we're going to get into these not weird, but these unusual. What we have here is a client who is building literally a door that's 7-inch thick. Here's the important part. They're centering the lock in the thickness of the door. They're not placing it biased towards one side or the other, because if they were, well, what I should say is where you locate the lock within the thickness of the door, regardless of the thickness of the door, is going to have a direct impact on the length of the spindle for the thumb turn, and of course the length of the cylinder. Now this cylinder is probably 3 3/8 in length, something in that range. I haven't measured it yet, but let's do so now. It's a little bit longer. Oh, that's because they've got a couple of cylinder collars here. That makes sense. I don't have a problem with cylinder collars. They've actually included a spacing ring as well. So they have a cylinder collar that incorporates a spacing ring. So that's getting us to about 3.5. If we were to use the thicker ring, I believe it's thicker. That should get us to 3 3/8. Yeah, right, spot on, 3 3/8. So this is going to be the ring that they'll use. Now, why am I coming up with 3 3/8? Okay. Because half a 7 is 3.5. Okay. Now, when you install that cylinder, any cylinder into the lock case, if you were putting 2 of them in there, I would hold it shy 1/8 of an inch. So door to the center is 3.5. I'm going to take off 1/8 of an inch because I want that cylinder to stand back from the true center line of the lock case by that 1/8 of an inch. If I was doing 2 cylinders back to back, I would probably hold each of them back a 1/16, but now we're really dealing with small numbers. And that's where the wave washer comes in. There's a wave washer here. You can see why they call it a wave washer. Okay, and that will allow you to thread the cylinder so that it compresses to the point where it's very firmly secured into the door. The client will not need both of these trim rings. They can use both of them, but there's no reason to have both of them. And quite frankly, because the thickness of the door was specified, centering the lock body in the door thickness was specified, having a cylinder collar included is normal, standard practice. Why I would say that we could have simply have used the thinner collar and then shortened up the length of that cylinder by, maybe 3/16. So having the thicker collar there does compensate for the extra length of the cylinder. And that thicker collar is, almost 3/8. I would prefer to have that cylinder project off the face of the door as minimal as possible. So I'm guessing that cylinder, maybe the factory has a limitation. Maybe they could not make it 3 3/8. Maybe it had to be this 3 3/4 length, which would be news to me. Yeah, this is 3 3/4. This cylinder should have been made at about 3 and, they could have gotten away with 3.5 or 3 5/8 with the thicker collar. So maybe it was a limitation. What the factory has done here, and it's a common practice, I've done this myself many times, and I know we were going to talk about the lock body first. We seem to have gotten a bit distracted, or at least I have. A couple of screws that are down inside of here. This whole portion is a machined piece of brass with the 1 5/32 diameter, 32 threads per inch. So they've taken those 2 holes, they've drilled and tapped them into an otherwise standard mortise cylinder. Okay, so there's nothing special about the mortise cylinder. You want to make a longer one, great. Get an extension, drill and tap a couple of holes, make it happen. I do that, I wouldn't say all the time, but I made 2 cylinders last weekend, and we can do that. So the point of the matter is, we've got a 7-inch thick door. I need a cylinder that's 3.5. No problem. We're either going to use a single piece like this or we're going to stack some other ones. It's easy stuff. Since we're playing with this cylinder, that's what's called a cloverleaf cam. Cloverleaf is the term. Every manufacturer will have a cloverleaf cam, I believe, and that's what Accurate needs for their mortise cases. Every cam is incredibly specific when it comes to it marrying or mating to the door that you are installing it on, or the lock case. The cam and the lock case have to be married together because the shape of the cam, in every respect, the length of the beaver tail, every respect is coordinated. These 2 outside shoulders, the width between that and the projection of the beaver tail. I don't know what that's called. I'm calling it a beaver tail. The overall length of the beaver tail. All of that is important because the yoke, or the bird's mouth shaped piece of material inside the lock case, it needs to kick back. And I need to have the right shaped cam so I can come in and grab it and come in and move it back. You get the point. Come in and turn it the other way. Okay? Come in and turn it the other way. You can't just toss any cam in there. You can try, and you can study like we are here. Okay, why does that move the way it does? Why does it work? Why does it not work? I've made my own cams because I had to, because I didn't have the right cam, and it's just mimicking the dimensional properties of a cam and you on the bench grinder of the original cam that you're trying to replace. Okay, so that's kind of cool. Then, if we want to get real fancy, there's our really long thumb turn. So when you do really thick doors, you need a longer cylinder, maybe a longer tail thumb turn. You're going to need an extended lip strike. And that's where this comes in as well. Okay. I can make these cylinders, these longer cylinders, and I do. Manufacturing a custom length strike lip does exceed my current tooling capabilities. This strike, I don't know what size it is. Let's measure it. The overall width is about 4 3/8. It's going to be 1 1/4 at the top. Okay, the length of that portion there is about 3 1/8. The height of it is about 3 5/16. However, extended lip strikes are exclusively measured from the center line of the hole to the edge of the lip, and that's about 3 7/8. Without me pulling up the formula, a curved lip strike needs to be about, the center line of the lock case in the door, the vertical center line of the screws. Okay. We've already established 3.5 inch to the center, and you're going to be accounting for 1/8 of an inch inset and then a 1/4 inch additional length for a curved lip strike, and that's where that 3 7/8 comes into play. So that's exactly what I had expected. Okay. Now, one nice thing that Accurate does that many other manufacturers do not, and I'm going to say that most people don't even notice it. However, maybe I'm just a hardware nerd, but I noticed it immediately. You'll notice that the center line of the hole for the deadbolt and the center line of the hole for the latch are not in the same center line. Well, they sure are here, though. They're in the same center line on the lock case. So why are they biased? Why is the deadbolt prep biased away from the door? It's very simple. It is assumed that this is an exterior door. It is assumed that you are going to have weather stripping on that door. What happens in a standard installation, and to a small degree with a roller latch lock, is that in your mind's eye now, imagine we have a lock with a latch and a deadbolt. You push the door, you're on the inside of your house, you close the door. Okay. When you close the door, the latch latches. But then what happens immediately after that is that the weather stripping that's installed becomes very compressed when you close the door and then relaxes, and it actually pushes the door out just a little bit. And the fact that that hole is biased towards the pull side of the door allows the deadbolt to operate correctly, because the door is really not now where you pushed it to hard against the weather stripping. It's actually relaxed a little bit. And if you've ever installed a mortise lock and found that you had to file the strike hole for the deadbolt a little bit, it's because of that. So I called Accurate once upon a time and said, listen, I've got a theory as to why you don't have those holes in the center. And he says, that's exactly why we do it. Now, I don't know if Accurate invented that, because you got to understand hardware goes back, centuries. A lot of what Accurate makes is unique to them. A lot of what Accurate makes is probably literally someone at Accurate who are some of the finest people that you will speak to. They're because of just how willing and accommodating they are. There's a gentleman that I speak to there relatively often, and every time that I talk to him, the invitation is open to do a factory tour. I can't say that it's just generally open, but I ever get to their neck of the woods, I'm absolutely going to take them up on that. A lot of what they make is probably reviewing catalogs from the 19th century, because some of the work that was done in the initial explosion of builders' hardware, of your Yales and your Corbins and your Sargents and your Reading and Chicago Brass and many other names that disappeared many, many decades ago. These guys were inventing all this stuff, and it's just really, well, maybe they weren't. Maybe they were pulling it out of, English. The modern pin tumbler cylinder invented by Linus Yale, which this principle is clearly founded on. He didn't invent the modern pin tumbler cylinder. The Egyptians did 4,000 years ago. He took that idea and said, okay, how can we make this fit into a lock? And he sure did so. Anyway, that's why that hole is biased a bit, and it's a hallmark of exactly the way that Accurate operates. And I have had them do some custom stuff in the past, and I'll tell you about the most custom thing I had them made at the end of the video. So we've talked about the longer parts. There is a dust box. I specified to the manufacturer I wanted a dust box. I want that to be a nice, clean installation. A dust box is exactly that. It keeps the particulate from the wall construction from entering into the living space. I don't want to look in the hole of the strike and see the rough cut of the wood frame. I don't want to see any of that. I want that covered nicely by this dust box, which it is. They have provided us screws for the strike. Okay, the 2 screws. There'll be 1224 machine wood thread combination. They'll also give us 2 screws for the lock body. Now this part here is called an armor front. When you remove these 2 very small screws, 832 by 3/8 flat undercut head, you'll get to the body itself, which will allow you access to, well, let's just show you. Stepping away to get a screwdriver. An armor front is basically a plate that covers the raw edge of the mortise lock. Armor fronts have been part of mortise lock work for at least a century. At least. I don't know the earliest appearance of an armor front, but you could, and you may have, if you deal in door locks, and you have for a while, you've probably seen mortise locks that have just a thick plate outside of here. Well, here's the thing. The armor front covers this raw unfinished edge. Those 2 other screws will mount the lock body to the edge of the door. But what that armor front does is it now conceals those 2 screws that are in there, that when I thread my cylinder in and then tighten those screws, these screws will come and lock and bite down into the edge right here. And it appears as if this piece has been installed in a door, or tested at least, with different thicknesses, to hold the cylinder in. So it covers that hole, okay? It also covers, you know, any sort, well, in an old mortise lock, 100+ years old, you'll have the breaching through there of the parts, the latch, the deadbolt, the stop works, the deadlocking tab if there is one, stop works if there is one, the buttons. But we'll cover access to those screws that hold your cylinder or cylinders in. Now, why is that important? Well, you know, if I had the right tool and some knowledge, you know, in theory, I could get in there and loosen that screw, or I can remove the cylinder and take my finger and get your door open. Okay? So that's the concept of an armor front, and that's why it's there. You want an armor front type construction. And unless you're purchasing a lock that was made, you know, by Yale in 1905, or Corbin, you're going to find armor fronts as standard practice. So what's missing from this order going to this client is a template. And, you know, admittedly, for people who deal in commercial locks, installation of that material, that's nothing other than, yeah, okay, I just need to get the template. There are no installation instructions with a lock like this. It does have to be ordered as a handed lock, in the sense that there's nothing handed about this lock case, because you can install the cylinder and the thumb turn on either side, but that strike is sure-handed, okay? Because it's standard convention that the deadbolt will be towards the top of the door, right? So this client has a left-hand reverse door, and from your perspective, the hinges are on the, on the left, and it swings towards you. This is a left-hand reverse door. That's how this client's door swings. It swings out. Now, why does it swing out? This is a residential job. I live in southern Florida. My exterior doors on my home, they swing out. This is going to Puerto Rico. I'm going to just guess, because I know it is the case here in Florida, that outswing and hurricane code go hand in hand. So the fact that the door swings out is to be expected for this type of application, meaning for the destination. If it was going to Chicago and he told me it was for his house, I would say, Are you sure it swings out? That door would swing in, but not necessarily other places. So what I'd like to do at this point is switch over to the screen view where we can get into the accurate hardware catalog and do a deeper dive on this material. So this is the item that we have in our site. Not much here, but a link to the manufacturer's page as seen here. And we're dealing with a really great company here, Accurate. The link to the manufacturer's page will allow us to get to the Accurate hardware product catalog, and we're going to open that up. And we're going to take a closer look at what they have as it pertains to this lock set. A deep dive into their catalog would be possibly quite enlightening in terms of what they do. So I'll leave that up to your pursuit. So I did a Control F or find function on my keyboard for 9124 RL roller latch, and it occurs in the catalog 8 times in the index and then to the product page. Okay, so what we have here are 9124 and 9024. The difference only is that the width of the armor front. A commercial lock would have 1.25 inch wide armor front, so that's why we went with the 9124. We do have to specify a back set. 2 3/4 is what the client requested on this order. 2.5 would be fine as well. They could have done that. What's important to think about in terms of back set and cylinders and door pulls, because we already said that we're putting door pulls on. We already said the client's putting door pulls on their door. Okay, we've got our beautiful lock body here. Okay, you get the idea. Cylinder is going to be here. Now, where are those door pulls? That's 2 3/4. Okay. Next time you walk through a mall, especially the ones that are outside, those doors will always have ladder pulls on them. A couple of mounting posts here, right? And then you'll see a cylinder partially blocked by the pull, or what you'll see is an offset pull. So be mindful when you're putting pulls and cylinders together, you know, where exactly you want that to fall into place. I believe that I have under our video gallery. Yeah, I did an analysis on door pulls and cylinder location. Just be mindful of where you're putting that. So obviously you want to be able to have the key in your hand and get your key into the cylinder and turn it comfortably. Now what some other people will do, which is a really great idea, and it is the proper idea for a door pull application. Here are my 2 mounting posts. They'll have the door pull offset. Okay? They'll literally, you know, the mount is going to look, you know, like this versus like this, so that the center line is moved over. Okay, so an offset pull. You want to be able to get your access to the cylinder, obviously, where you need it there. So be mindful to think that through. Now, the 9124, you can also do the 9139, which is a privacy roller latch. The only difference here really is going to be that there'll be nothing on the outside except for a emergency access for an emergency key, and then a thumb turn on the inside. This lock case is the same lock case for either scenario. We're just going to dump the mortise cylinder here, and then you're going to add an optional cover for an emergency key, and then have an emergency key available, and that emergency key will be the same thing as the spindle on the back of the thumb turn. Okay. 9125 is just a passage. You know, if you wanted pull handles and a roller latch only and a mortise lock, I can't really. It's an awfully expensive roller latch, is what I'm driving at with that. Although if your door is already prepped, you can get a roller latch for a mortise lock prep. Then, of course, a 9122 is a double cylinder function. You can put a cylinder on this as well. The lock case is the same on all of these except on the 9125 or 9025. They're not going to simply have the parts in there for the deadbolt, and they'll give you a different armor front. There are no hubs installed in this lock at all. If rigid hubs are required, please specify. So what that means is a hub is the item that mounts in the mortise lock in this area that the spindles will go into from your trim. If you were installing dummy trim that would go onto a mortise cylinder and you wanted to bolt those through the lock case, you could, but you would need rigid hubs for that so that the levers or knobs didn't spin. What I'm driving at is you could do dummy levers on this where you pull and push the door open with that rather than some sort of additional pull or another line item in your hardware set for this opening. As we continue to scroll through looking at all the instances where it occurs, it may not occur anywhere else that's super important except this is a system that they have available from the manufacturer that will show a couple of poles, you know, a ADA compliant turn on one side, etc. Just a derivative, just a lock type that has this lock case included with it. And that's really it. That's the only place that this really shows up. So, you know, there's not a lot to say about this except that it's a roller latch that incorporates a deadbolt. So it's a nice piece of equipment. Now, since we have the manufacturer's catalog open, just to touch on some highlights of the Accurate product line, what I would want to draw your attention to would be most certainly in the beginning of the catalog, the term custom hardware absolutely applies. These folks have done hardware for anyone, everyone who is anyone. Meaning, you know, I know that there is hardware in the White House that Accurate has manufactured. Absolutely. There are CEOs of our, you know, Fortune 10 companies that have Accurate throughout. You know, giants of our search engines and our social medias go to Accurate for hardware. The state capitol building in Texas, built in about don't quote me, but about 1875, in that range. You know, antebellum, forgive me, postbellum, has some absolutely beautiful hinges on the project. Oh, that's awful. Oh, here it is. Okay, these hinges are really, really beautiful. Okay, Accurate has duplicated this material, has provided the Texas State Capitol building in Austin with historic copies of this material. The building is full of them. This is an actual photograph of me in the State Capitol building in Texas. Okay, so they do that kind of work. Historic restoration, just mentioned there alone. Custom work, custom hardware. We did a project in the Qatar International Airport. The door to the air traffic control tower, or a door, is a mortise lock. That mortise lock has 2 cylinders in it on each side of the door. Well, on the ingress side of the door, where they require 2 different keys, 2 separate keys to lock and unlock the door. So if you need to get in that door, you need each person that has their key. Those locks there were 2 of them on the job. Those locks were $7,500 each, and they were really cool. They were very simple because I inspected the lock works before I shipped them to the Mideast. They were simple in their concept, but just perfect in their operation. So if you can think it, Accurate may be able to do it. But what is really most striking about Accurate is that they are very, very accommodating, willing, open, happy to discuss it, etc. So they have lots of mortise locks, etc., in different formats, but in different operations as well. Electrified locks, but what I'm driving at here is their ability to do backsets. They can do lots of backsets. They can do narrow style locks. So here, 2.5, 2 3/4, 3 3/4, 5 inch, and 6 inch, and they can get way beyond that. They can do narrow stuff, 1.25 inch, 1.5 inch, 1 3/4, 2 inch, and 2 1/4. Okay, so when it comes to backsets, they can do it with functions, and these guys can make your mortise bodies to accommodate whatever trim you like. You love Baldwin trim? I do too. You can slap on custom Accurate mortise locks onto that hardware set, and you'll be as right as rain, etc. So I wanted to call out the different backsets. Obviously, all the custom functions that they can do. Electrification is clearly an invention of Accurate. You're not going to see that in a electrified mortise locks. You won't see in a 1896 catalog. Although electric strikes were in early 20th century catalogs. I don't forget the term that they used. They didn't call them electric strikes or buzzers or things of that nature, but you can research that. Bit key locks, which you might say takes a skeleton key. That's not what we call them. It'd be called a bit key, but the term skeleton key certainly applies. Historic work is where you might need that. You're doing a project in New England. You've got a colonial home that was literally built in 1860. Yeah, you're going to run into bit key locks. Speaking of that application, we just did a job for a client where they had that colonial home and they were replicating a deadbolt that had a rabbeted front because the door, it was actually a single door, the door and the frame were rabbeted, where you had your that's a bad drawing. You have your door, okay, it swings in. You have a jamb. Your stop is going to be here. It is rabbeted. Oh, no, we did that wrong. Okay, a rabbeted type jamb. So the lock body literally sits right inside of here. So what you need to do is to have a rabbeted style either kit that can be applied to a lock, or you literally, and this is how it was done 100+ years ago, where the front of the lock case itself is literally manufactured in the traditional style. Okay, that's how you're going to see that material. Pairs of doors are great applications for rabbeted doors, because why? Well, I have my door, I have my active door, I have my inactive door right through there. You can see things can blow through. Let's do this. Let's take our active door. Let's take our inactive door. Just a gross example of that. I apologize. An artist I am not. Now you're not seeing through there. Wind's not going to come through so easily. Rabbeted door edge is very typical and common. Accurate can do that very, very easily. That's stock and trade for Accurate. getting back to where we were, because the name Accurate is so synonymous with so many different unusual applications. They can do small case mortise deadbolts. They do a nice job of those. There's no shortage of getting those anywhere, but they do those as well. Narrow style deadbolts. Mortise style thumb turns. Or mortise bolts is what these would be called. This would be a mortise bolt. You could throw a thumb turn onto it. They'll get into a series of solid stainless or solid brass bronze pivots, as you can see. They're not the only people who do this, and maybe people don't think of them. Well, maybe people do. Pivots are not the first thing I think of when I think of Accurate. Lots of pivots. This is what's called a Harmon hinge. A Harmon hinge or a pocket pivot hinge. Yeah, there's a patent filing where it's called Harmon, and that would probably be late 19th century. A Harmon hinge is an interesting hinge in that a Harmon hinge, you have your frame, you have your door, okay? You open that door up 90 degree with a standard hinge. That door is going to reside about here. The point is that the door encroaches into the clear opening space. It encroaches into it. It's sticking out here. What a Harmon hinge does is, because of the way that it is, because of where its vertical axis of pivoting occurs, you've got this hinge, you've got your door, it's pivoted here, and here it's pivoted here. What happens is when this door opens, with that pivot point being in here, the door actually ends up being, oh, we had it right. This is now communicating to here. And it does not encroach into the space at all. That's what a Harmon hinge does. Oh, actually, I've got that wrong. It makes it flush with the rabbet, so it's going to be kicked over a little bit further. You can definitely do a deep dive on Harmon hinges and see where those fall into play. Some beautiful applications of them. Now, here's where you're going to see them in everyday life. Hopefully not everyday life, unless you are in the healthcare industry. Hospitals use pocket pivots or Harmon hinges all the time. Because why? Well, I'm coming through the opening, possibly at great speed because I have an emergency literally in front of me, and that kicking the door out of the opening prevents damage from happening to the door when it's hanging into the opening. That's what you'll use a pocket or Harmon hinge for. Well, there it is. There it's being shown. A couple of different ways to do that. You need to do a real big ball prep, a ball route on the edge, or if it's a hollow metal door, they will actually be an inverted U-channel that's there. But great applications. You don't do them often, but you know we stock them. Not by Accurate because people don't, you know, Accurate wouldn't be the one. Not that I wouldn't stock it by Accurate, but people call it for other manufacturers. Custom strikes, obviously this lock required a custom strike because of the extended lip length. This is a rescue, well, it could be a rescue strike. Yeah, it's in a rescue strike. So this door is going to swing in all the time, except when you need to push that in and have the door swing out. You'll see that in hospital patient rooms all the time. Key lockable. You want to prevent someone from getting that door open without the key, like a nurse should have a key. A nurse would have a key. Rabbited kits we've gone over. Edge pulls. That's a typical piece of equipment, but you see them all the time. Hardware where you want, doors where you want to conceal the hardware as much as possible is where you're going to see knife pulls or edge pulls used with center hung pivots. More edge pulls are here. Flush pulls, a variety of door hardware like that you'll see from them. You can scroll through that. More pivot hardware. Oh, this is a dust box. What's interesting about this dust box is you can fit into it a bolt from a actual deadbolt. It's wide enough here to accommodate that. Just barely, but it is. I've done that. I've had people that wanted to put a deadbolt in the bottom of a inactive door in a pair and have the bolt into the floor, but they didn't want to just have a strike with a hole in the floor, and a standard dustproof strike will only work with flush bolts. Well, the 8790, if you get that installed in just the right location, it will take the bolt from the deadbolt. We actually have a GD1106 on this order. This is what the client ordered, except that this is just a lot longer. Okay, this is a cam plug or a turn disc that you would use with a certain type of lock prep. There's that handicap compliant emergency turn releases and more locks. Okay, ligature resistant material. They get into that ligature resistant hardware for psychiatric applications. Backset extension. So if you wanted to throw your lock, your trim down through into the center of the door, they can accommodate that. In the 1950s and early 60s, you would see unusual backsets: 5-inch, 7-inch, 12-inch, 18-inch. You can do that with a mortise lock from Accurate. They'll modify that. Locks for sliding doors. These are pretty cool. These two little prongs project when you throw the bolt out and retract when you throw it in. Or Harmon hinge material. Concealed Harmon hinge. Well, they're all kind of concealed. Oh, I see what they're doing here. You don't even see it in the frame. Okay, so yeah, that'll take some customization, but they can manufacture those Harmon hinges so that you can apply something over the rabbet of the jamb so you'd never see that hinge. There you go. That covers the entire catalog. Finishes of what they can do are back here. I'm sure they can plate to practically every finish. Let's finish up this video on camera. So in conclusion, I'm unapologetically a fan of Accurate. Not only is it good quality material, but just their bedside manner is really good. So that roller latch, there's nothing really to do there. That's just going to compress in and out as the door opens and closes. You're going to throw your cylinder on the outside. You're going to bring your thumb turn from the other side. You're in good shape. This is a 2 3/4 version of this lock. Edge of the door to the center of the hole, 2 3/4. Be mindful that backset is measured from the, if your door is 1 3/4 thick, it's not measured from one side or the other. It's measured from the center of the door. You don't want to measure 2 3/4 on a beveled edge door. If you do that on both sides, those holes will not be in alignment. So compensate for that. And that's it. It's a simple lock. We haven't sold a ton of them, but they're certainly, they've been popular for a couple of years, and more so increasingly. Would I end up using one? Sure, I wouldn't see why I wouldn't. There are less expensive ways to ultimately accomplish the job. However, I think what really forced this client into this sort of application is because of this. 7-inch door thickness, okay? And they were centering the lock in the door. A standard roller latch, of which you can put 2 or 3 on there, you've got a problem with that strike. That's a cast strike on those items. So coming up with a manufacturer of a roller latch that can do an extended lip, I'm sure Accurate can do it, but this client was all in on a very robust grade 1 mortise lock. Okay. Obviously not UL listed. This would not be appropriate for use on a fire door. It does not positively latch the door or mechanically latch the door. That link below this video to the manufacturer's page where we pulled up the catalog originally is where you will be able to review not only the catalog, but all the Accurate products we sell and any other encyclopedic documents that we keep there. Any questions on the 9124 RL, Accurate Roller Latch Lock, or any other Accurate product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.